Hungry by Christopher Gorham Calvin. Spoiler warnings. Minor spoilers for Chance Hotel under new management. The creature stirred, its primitive mind swirling with unexpected activity that sent tiny jolts through its nervous system. It clung to its slumber, instinct telling it that it wasn't time to wake, that it still had fuel to burn and no need to seek a feast. But something didn't want it to remain asleep. Something was prodding it, not physically, but mentally, as if reaching across the fabric of time and space to intrude upon the creature's peaceful rest. It shuffled its viscous mass, nestling tightly against the sides of the crook it had slowly seeped into over the years. Deep sleep gripped it once more, emptying the creature's mind and carrying it away to a land of unconscious thought. "Wake up!" The unspoken foreign words startled the creature, ripping it from sleep's embrace and jump-starting its mental faculties. It was alert now, any hope of drifting off again shattered by the intrusive force that had penetrated its mind. It expanded and contracted the membrane that contained its fluid-like material, the equivalent of stretching its muscles as it woke from its dormancy. The creature then oozed forth from its crook, its body molding to fill the stress lines and fractures of the hard wooden root that had formed that crook as it passed over them. It reached the cool, damp surface of the forest floor, then pulled itself up the muddy incline of the pit into which it had settled long ago, when it was much fuller and more voluminous in scale. The creature reached the top of the incline, then paused beneath a break in the forest canopy overhead. The stars weren't in their expected positions. That could only mean one thing. The creature had indeed woken early. But why? What was that force that had insisted and abandoned its slumber prematurely? The creature had heard its voice, and though it couldn't match the voice to a face, the interaction had stirred a recollection from a time long since past. Something moved nearby. The creature extended a portion of its body to examine the source of the motion. It was a furry animal, brown with a bushy tail, and smaller than the creature was in its present state, though bigger than it would have been had it finished its natural hibernation cycle. The animal presented no threat to the creature. It was scurrying about, seeking a morsel for its next meal, the same as the creature would do soon enough. It ignored the critter and retracted its bodily extension, then oozed forward across the forest floor. With a normal hibernation cycle of 25 years, the forest in which the creature lived looked significantly different from one feasting window to the next. As such, the creature was born with an innate navigation technique that relied on a combination of the Earth's magnetic forces and the gravitational pulls of celestial bodies to guide its direction. But it had never woken early before. The Earth's magnetic field was slightly out of alignment from expectations. If that had been the only issue, the creature probably could have adapted and went about business as usual. But the stars and planets were also in incorrect positions, and unraveling the multitude of competing gravitational forces they exuded was beyond its mental capacity. It entered a shallow stream, shifting to keep a portion of its body above water as it crossed to the other side. The creature didn't recall crossing this stream on its way to its slumbering pit during the last feasting window. Perhaps it had been too large to notice at the time, the stream indistinguishable from other moisture that had graced the forest floor as it squeezed its massive frame between tree trunks and overfallen leaves and twigs. Or perhaps the stream hadn't existed all those years ago, and reflected the ever-changing landscape that comprised the creature's home while it rested. There was also a third possibility, that the stream had existed, but that the creature had never crossed it. But it didn't want to acknowledge that possibility, for it meant its lack of reliable navigation had veered the creature off course. It had to hope that wasn't the case. The food inside the creature would have lasted at least another 9 months or so while it slept. Awake, it would last perhaps half a day at most. Then the creature would need to eat. Of course, the forest itself provided plenty of sustenance, should the creature be willing to consume it. It could have eaten the critter from earlier. It could have consumed the wooden root that had protected it during its most recent hibernation and absorbed the water of the shallow stream. But the creature was spoiled. It had survived on those foods for most of its early life, until one day it had tasted something better. That something didn't grow naturally in the woods. It was made by the animal the creature now knew as man, and no matter how much of it the creature consumed, it always wanted more. Luckily, by the time it woke from each of its hibernation cycles, man had rebuilt the food it had previously eaten, providing an ample buffet on which the creature could gorge. It continued on a straight path through the forest, finding nothing but the common flora and fauna that typically shared its home. A wolf howled somewhere to the creature's right. The creature had learned the wolves in these woods tended to avoid man, so it should not head toward their calls. But still uncertain where to go, it maintained its trajectory for another hour, after which it stopped to assess its surroundings. There were dark woods in every direction, with no signs of artificial light, one of the telltale signs of man's presence. The creature feared it might be lost. Worse, it could tell that its mass had already shrunk since waking. It was burning through its fuel reserves even faster than it thought it would. Soon, it would need to forage, and at this rate, that foraging would need to be done on the unappealing cuisine of its youth. The creature oozed forth in the same direction it had been going, but then a feeling struck it, a feeling that it was going the wrong way and should turn to its left. The creature ignored the feeling, aware that its gut instincts knew nothing more about its location or trajectory than its actively processing mind. The feeling struck the creature again, this time more insistent than the first. The creature realized the feeling wasn't originating from within, but rather from beyond. It came from the same force that had woken the creature, and though that force had no physical form, the creature couldn't help but acknowledge its existence. It paused and looked to its left. There was nothing near nor far to suggest left was a better direction than straight ahead, but the creature felt a sense of approval as it observed the new direction, as if going that way was the correct choice, even if its innate navigation couldn't confirm it. The creature hesitated, but with no reason not to try the alternate direction, it shifted its momentum and headed down the path its unseen influencer had encouraged. It oozed along for another hour and a half, feeling its mass continue to shed, until it finally broke through a thick wall of shrubbery and emerged into a clearing covered in fallen leaves that floated on large standing puddles of rainwater. This was no better than where the creature had started its journey, only now it was running on empty, to the point where it would need to stop and recuperate, even if that meant eating from an undesirable menu of options. The creature oozed to the nearest puddle and tested it with an extension of its body. The water was unappetizing, borderline sickening, and the creature was nauseated by the thought of having to consume more of it. But it was desperate, and desperation left no room for pickiness. The creature rolled down into the puddle and opened its membrane to the water, prepared to consume it in its entirety. But then a brief reflection of light caught its attention. Unlike the blue-tinted light that reflected down from the moon, this light was yellow, warm, perhaps even appetizing. The creature watched for the reflection again, and when it spotted that yellow flicker once more, it followed the light to its source. The light had come from beyond the far end of the clearing, where dense trees hid it from view. The creature abandoned its puddle of desperation and moved where it would have a better angle. That's when it saw the part in the trees, and beyond the part, the buildings. They were the buildings that had served as the creature's buffet for many feasting windows. They were a collection of succulent man-made creations, each ripe for the creature's consumption, fuel that was both hearty and tasty and would slowly digest within it for years to come. Where would it begin this year? It needed to eat soon, but that didn't mean it couldn't sample its options before choosing a main course. It just needed to avoid man until that decision had been made, for until then, it would be more vulnerable than usual. As it set off toward the windows of artificial yellow light that awaited, the creature reflected on nearly settling for the stale rainwater and forest scrub that was more easily attainable. It had been too quick to give up on getting what it wanted, but it wouldn't make that mistake again. The creature might still be hungry, mere hours from withering into a pile of dried-up dust, but it was no longer desperate. Its choice meal was within its grasp, and it would gorge on that meal until it was satisfied and ready for its next hibernation. Or until there was nothing left on which to gorge.